Hi there. Can people hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Okay, great. Um, well, welcome everyone. It's 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon, um, March 30th, and welcome to the Center for Coastal Studies first Facebook Live presentation. Dare I say ever? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Um, in this new world, um, current situation, we are going online, and this week we have three great presentations. So today we're going to be starting with watching whales from shore. So I know many of you are staying at home, and that's great during this time of the coronavirus. And we wish everyone to stay home and stay healthy. But here in Massachusetts, and I know in some other places, it's still okay to go out and take a walk and maybe head down to the shore, head down to the beach. You can self distance down there, and you can still watch, be in your car and watch things from your car. So today we're going to talk a little bit about seeing whales from shore and what type of whales you might be able to see from shore. So we're just going to get in and start with the presentation. Hopefully this will work as I share my screen with you all. Um, I believe you see that. So for those of you who don't know us, the Center for Coastal Studies, we're located in Provincetown, Massachusetts, right there at the tip of Cape Cod. We're a research, education, and rescue nonprofit, independent nonprofit that's been operating since the mid to late 1970s. And again, we're most probably well known for our whale research. We've been researching whales in the Gulf of Maine for over 40 years. And today, we're going to talk about watching whales from shore. Um, so, how do we know what whales we see? And there are some telltale signs that some whales give us out there. Go to down to a beach or from a favorite lookout point, and we see out in our waters that sometimes we can know exactly what species we're looking at. Doesn't take a um, expert trained eye. With these few helpful hints, hopefully you'll be able to go out there and identify whales on your next time down at the beach, whether it's over the next few weeks or next year or in the future. Whenever you go down, you see something from shore. So just a brief overview, there's roughly 89 species of cetaceans worldwide. That's whales, dolphins, and porpoises. And I say roughly 89 because, believe it or not, we still find new species of whales. Just as recently as 2019, they found a new species of what is known as a beaked whale, sort of whale that's type of whale that's not really well known, deep diving whales that live far out at sea. But even as recent as the early 2000s, a new species of large baleen whale was discovered. Not really discovered, but found out to be a whale different than what was previously thought. So, roughly 89 species of cetaceans. I'm really going to be talking about just a few of the large baleen whales because there's one, they're large and they're simply the easiest ones to see from shore and the easiest to identify. I'm also going to be focusing just on the East Coast of the United States. There are any West Coast viewers out there. I apologize for this. You have actually quite a few whales that you can see from shore out on the West Coast. Some of the same we can see here on the East Coast, but I'm just going to be focusing on East Coast whales for today, just to keep the presentation rather brief. So the four species that we are going to discuss that you can readily see from shore in different spots on the East Coast are the minke whale, which is a relatively small baleen whale, small for whales, 21 to 28 feet or 6.5 to 8.8 meters. The fin whale, which is the um, largest baleen whale we have in these parts of the world, generally that you can see from land. Now, on the West Coast, again, any West Coasters out there, you can see blue whales, which are the largest animal on the planet. And we do have blue whales that occasionally swim by parts of the East Coast, but generally they're further out to sea and would not be visible from land. Fin whales can grow up to 74 feet and even larger in the southern hemisphere. The humpback whale is a whale that probably many people know. It's the acrobatic whale. It's the whale that the center's been studying for many years up here in the Gulf of Maine. It's a whale that's readily seen from shore all over the world, in fact. But here on the East Coast, you have humpback whales in the Gulf of Maine, but also as far down as the mid-Atlantic during the fall and winter months. So humpbacks are one of those species that can be seen from shore. And because they're so active, they're actually quite an easy species to identify. So they can grow up to 55 feet or 17 meters. And then finally, the fourth whale we'll be discussing today is the North Atlantic right whale. If you tune back in on Friday, I believe Dr. Stormy Mayo will be giving an update on the status of right whales in Cape Cod Bay. North Atlantic right whales are incredibly endangered. They roughly number about 400 individuals, and we're fortunate that for whale watchers on the East Coast, these whales swim up and down the coast from Florida all the way up to Maine, and even further into the Canadian Maritimes. They actually stay pretty close to shore in some spots. Some places like Cape Cod, where we're located, we can have right whales just a few meters offshore. They are distinctive as well. Some of their surface activity is quite distinctive. So they're also another easily identifiable whale. They can be quite large, growing up to 58 feet or 18 meters in length. So we all know the old adage, "There she blows," when you're looking for a whale. Really, the first sign of any cetacean in the water, large cetaceans, is the blow or the spout. Hopefully, we're all familiar with what this is of a whale. It's actually not swallowed water as you would have in Finding Nemo, but is actually the breath of the whale. As it comes up from a deep dive, it exhales, and the pressure from its huge lungs and the coldness of the outside air hitting the warm air creates this visible breath, just as you would see on a cold day as you are blowing out. So spouts of these large whales can be different, and it's one way of actually telling them apart, although it's certainly not the easiest way. Minkies, of course, I just said spouts. We can tell minkies tend to have very little visible spout or no spout at all that you can see. So minkies aren't really a great one for using the spout to identify them, unfortunately. But we can sometimes with the other larger whales. Finbacks, fin whales tend to be very high. These are large animals, as I said, growing up to 70 feet long, and they have very large lungs that can produce very high spouts. Again, anyone, West Coasters who might have seen blue whale spouts are incredibly powerful and loud. When they come up, it can be frightening if you're not expecting it, because it's such power being blown out of their lungs. Humpbacks have lower and rounder spouts than fin whales, but of course, on a windy day, it's hard to tell this. It's really easy if it's flat, calm, and you see the whale spouting, but on windy days, it can be hard to tell how high the spout really was. And finally, our North Atlantic right whales have very distinctive V-shaped spouts. Again, this is clearly visible on days where it's calm, and when you're looking a certain direction at the whale. If you're side on to the whale, you might not see the spout in this distinctive V, this photograph was taken by our aerial team. You can see that distinctive V right there. But if you are sort of looking at the whale towards its tail or towards its head, it is very clear to see this V when the whale spouts. So that's a clear sign that this is a North Atlantic right whale, and no other whale on the East Coast would have a visible spout just like this one. Also, another way to look for the whales is in some areas you may have large flocks of birds feeding that could indicate whale activity. Many of these large whales feed on small fish. Minkies, fin whales, and humpbacks all feed on small fish that a lot of these birds will chase after. So a big flock of birds could be an indication of whales around. So it's a good sign to be looking for whales if you see large flocks of birds, especially down into the water after fish. The next thing to look for when trying to identify these whales is surface activity. And some of these 4 species, some of these are more surface active than others. Unfortunately, with our minkies, they don't have much of a spout and they don't have much surface activity. This is basically the view of a minkie that you're most likely to get. This is one of the best views I've ever had of a minkie. And it's not to say that minkies don't do other activities like breaching or jumping. It's just much rarer than other large species like humpbacks or even right whales. So minkies, you won't get a lot of a spout. You'll get a small bit of curvage of the back and the fin. And that space can be anywhere from 5 to 9 feet, roughly depending on the size of the whale. And that's really much that we get the views of the minkies. Minkies tend to be solitary, so you'll see one, but you might see others in the vicinity of the one minkie as well. But you won't see them traveling in pods or groups or anything like that. For most people, when they see a minkie, they think they see a large dolphin, and I just have this little dolphin image here as a comparison. I'll go back to the next slide. You can see that, and then our dolphin image. A lot of people, when they see a minkie, they realize, oh, I just saw a large dolphin. Two characteristics that are distinguishable. One, with dolphins, really what you see with a dolphin is just the dorsal fin, as you can see here, and it tends to be up and down rather quickly. And the second characteristic is dolphins are generally seen with other dolphins. So if you see one dolphin, you're generally going to see more dolphins because they travel in family groups or pods. Minkies are solitary, so you're going to see one. Again, this larger, a little bit back with a little bit fin versus just the fin itself. Minkies are also larger than dolphins, so again, for most people, when they see a minkie, they think they've seen a large dolphin. Fin whales also do not exhibit much surface activity apart from coming up to breathe, but fin whales are quite large, and so they can be quite distinctive when you see them. When they come up to blow, and you see this back is can be pretty long, anywhere from 10 to 20 feet roughly, and they're really well named, fin back. So when they come up, you see quite a bit of fin, or quite a bit of back, and then their fin. Finbacks also don't engage in a lot of other surface activity that would be visible from shore, but fin whales do occasionally breach, although it is quite rare. So again, this is the view that most of us would get of finbacks from the water, a lot of back and a fin, a very high spout, and these animals are also quite fast. So they'll be moving through the water pretty quickly and can cover great distances in a pretty short period of time. You might see finbacks traveling together, but they won't be in large groups of 5 or more, generally speaking. But you could see a few finbacks in the same vicinity, most likely feeding on the same animal. Humpbacks we're really fortunate because humpbacks, their surface activity is the most active, and generally, if you see a whale that's very active out in the waters, at least on the East Coast, it's a humpback. You could probably say that for Hawaii as well, and probably places on the West Coast as well. Humpbacks do the things that we like to see in nice documentaries, like breaching or jumping out of the water. They have long flippers that can be visible. They sometimes stick those up into the air. Their name, actually, their scientific name means long-winged New Englander. And these flippers can sometimes be seen from shore, clear signs that these are humpbacks in the water. These flippers tend to be white, and if you're ever out on a boat, you can see them. They reflect green in the water. It's a great way of identifying where the whale might come up again. Humpbacks also have this hump sort of in their back. They have these ridges just past the dorsal fin, and will curve up their back when they're ready to dive. With the minkies and fin whales, when they go for dives, we do not see generally this, or flukes. With humpbacks, particularly down on a deep dive, we do see their flukes or tails quite often, and this is a great way for us to know that it's to distinguish it from minkie or finback. but it's also the way that the center has been identifying whales for over 40 years, and actually how researchers all over the world identify individual whales. This allows us to have life histories of these animals. We have whales, one whale, Salt, going back to 1976, and we've been looking at her children and grandchildren and now great grandchildren. We're able to study this because of the markings on their tails. Humpbacks, as I said, will dive down. They lift their tails up. So this is a pretty clear indication that this whale is neither a minke nor a finback. If there is some confusion, there could possibly be some confusion with finbacks if the whale is far offshore and if it's a large humpback. But if you see the tail going down, this almost 100% on the east coast of the U.S. anyway would indicate a humpback whale. Now, our last whale is the North Atlantic right whale. These are, as I mentioned, endangered whales, and their surface activity is actually quite different from all the other whales. This is an image of a right whale, its head out of the water feeding. Right whales are one of the exclusive plankton-eating whales in the world. They feed on tiny little creatures, tiny little crustaceans called copepods, seen here. And a lot of times, the copepods will congregate near the surface because they are in turn feeding on tiny phytoplankton, little photosynthetic organisms that need light to reproduce and survive. And these whales will come up in large patches, bringing their bodies to the surface and bring their heads actually above the surface as they skim feed through the water. So this is a whale that actually will stay at the surface for quite some time. Unlike humpbacks, fins, and minkies that will come up, take a breath, and go down. In the case of humpbacks, they might be at the surface jumping or flippering or slapping their tail. Right whales will actually stay at the surface for up to a minute or more while they're feeding. And if you go down to some beaches in their feeding areas, places around Cape Cod, particularly, you can see these animals going back and forth just like combines in a field as they're snatching up this little prey using their very long sheets of baleen. Another image of the right whale feeding right there from shore. So if you're out in the waters and you see some sort of relatively black looking thing that kind of looks like a rock and it's actually moving, chances are it's a right whale. In this picture here, the right whale's head is above water. You can see that little water off to the left-hand side. That's its tail as it's moving through the water. It takes an awful amount of energy for this whale to stick its head up like this, move through the water. So they need to be getting lots of those little copepods to fill them up. And at the center, we've been studying not only the right whale for decades, but we've also been studying their food source. And we've discovered that when they come to Cape Cod Bay in Massachusetts, it's a very productive time for them. And we're lucky that we almost every year we get over half of the world's population coming to feed. So it's a great place to go out and look anywhere along Cape Cod Bay in Massachusetts to look for these animals. A telltale sign is this black thing moving through the water. Right whales also do occasionally breach. It's not as frequent as humpbacks, but they do occasionally jump out of the water. They're a bit bigger and fatter than humpbacks. They tend to be mostly black, at least on the top. Their whites can be their bottoms can be white, but they do occasionally breach. So if you see a breaching whale or a jumping whale, it's not necessarily a humpback. It can be a right whale, but also the time of year would help determine that. Right whales tend to be closer to shore and more visible in the winter and spring months, and humpbacks tend to be closer to shore and more visible in the summer to fall months. Right whales can be a little cryptic in the water as well because they turn their bodies to move and as they're feeding on this plankton. This is an image of a right whale, the side of its fluke or its tail as it's swimming through the water. You can see just how close to shore it is and just how close to shore these animals come. I've personally witnessed right whales within 20 meters of shore. With humpbacks, I would say it's about 10 meters, and I've seen a minke about 2 meters away from me in the water. over the years. Right whales also do sometimes fluke or lift their tails in the air while they dive. This is an image of a right whale fluke or tail, but you can see it does differ quite a bit from the humpback fluke or tail. One, in its shape, it tends not to have the ridges that the humpback does, as you see here. It's not as pointed up at the side, and it tends to be all black. So, unfortunately for researchers, the flukes or tails of right whales are not the best way for identifying them. In fact, you can't identify them that way, but they do have their own individual identifiable marks, which are on the top of their head called callosities. That's how our researchers identify these animals. But they do sometimes fluke. So if you see a tail that has gone down from a whale out there, it might not be a humpback. It could be a right whale. You would have to search for the other surface activities, such as the head moving in the water for a right whale, or flippering would be indication of a humpback. And this is just a quick chart I found online. Again, it gives you a synopsis of what we've been just talking about, although this is for not all the species. We have a southern right whale, but our North Atlantic right whale would have the same V-shaped blow. Diving, you can see that tail again. Other characteristics might be a flipper, the edge of the tail. We don't have, again, blue whales that are generally visible on the east coast from shore, but you can see the fin whale with quite a long back and the fin there, a high spout. Humpback whales, again, we see lots of surface activity with them. We see their tails, we see flippers, we see breaching, we see tail slapping. We see a lot of activity that could indicate it's a humpback, a bushy blow. And then minke, they do have a spout down at the bottom there, but a lot of times the spout of the minke is not readily seen. Again, look for that very quick back and small dorsal fin, and as I said before, most people believe that it's a large dolphin they saw. Minkies are fast as well, so you might see one in one area and then popping up a few seconds later or a minute later in a different area. So minkies are quite fast animals. So we're going to take a little whale watching quiz here with our friend Alex Trebek, and we'll see how you do. I'm just gonna, you can write in the answers. I'm not gonna be able to see them, but I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can get the answer in your head, and then I'll come back on. I'll get out of the presentation and answer some questions. So here we have an image right here. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can determine what type of whale this might be based on the characteristics we just talked about. Its closeness to shore, the shape of what you see in the water, what else you see. So I'll give you about 5 seconds. Play the Jeopardy theme song. Do, 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 do. So right here we have actually two North Atlantic right whales. So you see the head of one, and you can just make out those callosities, those white growths on top of the whale's head with the right arrow there. That's how we identify these animals. And then this would be the tail of another whale swimming close by. Let's go to the sample number 2. So this one is a bit harder. There's not much visible of this animal. One of the things that might give this away is how close to shore this is, and perhaps its speed, which it's hard to tell from a photograph, but it doesn't look like this is a very fast whale moving. And this is also a North Atlantic right whale. We don't see the visible head. We don't see any of other flukes or flippers. But right whales, because they feed on very small animals, they are actually not very fast. They move slowly through the water because the animals that they feed on are not very fast, at least for their size. So a whale sort of slowly moving through the water like this, this close to shore, is a right. Next one, here we have one. I'll give you a couple seconds to take your guess on this one. Our identifiable features here, would be the arching of the back. This is from the back, so we can't be certain, exactly certain. Maybe this could be a fin whale, maybe this could be a minke, but in the end, this is a humpback. You can see that arching. You can kind of see the ridges right there on its back, and it's about to rise up, and you'll see its tail come out of the water, or you would have if you were there. Seen the tail come out of the water and easily identify that as a humpback whale. 5 seconds for this one. So this one, what identify are we looking at? There's not much to go on, just a little back and a fin. It could be a dolphin, but it is in fact a minke. It's, as I said, with dolphins, you're generally only going to see the fin, and you're going to see more than one in most cases. So this is really a glimpse of a minke that most of us get. Most of us get from shore. Most of us get from boats. They are fast and elusive animals here in the East Coast, and really a little bit of back and a fin is about all you're going to see from minkies, especially when watching from shore. They are quite common, however, so if you do go down to beaches, look out for them because they are quite common animals. And then this one here, this is a bit harder. We don't see much. We don't see any fins. We don't see any tails. We don't see any flippers. It's quite large animal. No other visible signs, no other surface activity. Any guesses out there? Your guess is as good as mine, because I cannot identify this whale as shown by this picture either. I know because picture I have of this was a humpback, it was a humpback. But from this indication, we would really need more information to know what kind of whale this is. And sometimes the experts, even looking out, have a difficult time when it comes to these. So give it your best shot when you go out there. Look for some of the visible signs. Look for the spouts if you can see them. Think of the characteristics, the activity that these animals will use. Right whales will be at the shore for a short period of time. Humpbacks might be very surface active, breaching, flipper slapping, tail slapping. Minkies, you're probably not going to get more than a small little back and a fin. And finbacks, you'll get a large back and a fin, and pretty large spout. So if you're on standing, see a spout quite far in the distance, very often that could be a finback because their spouts are very large. So I wonder how you did. So I'm going to stop sharing and the slideshow and take any questions that folks might have. Hopefully they can get back to this.